Hello, and welcome back to Spiral Revival. This is the first episode of season 3, and I'm in my new home. This isn't actually exactly where I'm living, but it's one of the structures on this beautiful land that I really, really like. It feels like a creative spaceship ready to take off into whatever direction we wish to take it. Still revealing its name to us. Right now it's just called the Small Dome. Well, for this season, I have had this idea for a while and I finally am ready to embark upon it. And this is the idea of going over the book that I wrote, That's Just Reality, which in a way inspired me to start this podcast because I felt that I got comfortable with myself as a writer and my voice as a writer, though I definitely have so much more to explore there. And I realized that I could express my ideas in writing if I took enough time, 3 years to make this one. But it was quite difficult for me to still put them into words. And I ended up feeling like concepts I felt like friends with and familiar with and comfortable with, somebody else may think I know nothing about because I had no way of putting them into words or being able to express myself eloquently. And so along my journey and pursuit of eloquence, I started this podcast to challenge myself and see what would happen. And so for season 3, and for reasons I'll go into, I think it's the perfect time to embark on this chapter of embarking through the chapters of this book. Yeah, that's just reality. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you own a copy, maybe you've heard me talk about it many times before, or maybe you had no idea that I wrote a book. This book I started writing when I was 18 years old in 2018. I went to Spain to study philosophy in La Universidad de Valladolid. And this year was very challenging and also very enlightening for me along my path and allowed me to really go deep into concepts and ideas and beliefs and question my beliefs. And I had already written, put together, published, shared, sold out of like 4 kind of like magazines, print works, and I was just gonna simply start working on my 5th one. But this book revealed to want to be a book, like a real one with an ISBN number and everything. And so I embarked on this journey not knowing that I wouldn't have the copy in my hands until 2021, 4 years later. And yeah, I mean, it started because studying philosophy, I was reading ancient literature and studying ancient Greek and going to the park after school, inspired by the ideas I was learning about, either with my friends or alone, and continuing to read them, becoming friends with Plato through my own readings, and feeling so inspired and full of ideas that essays would just like ooze out of me. And I eventually I ended up with a catalog of writings and essays and ideas, which I eventually had to letter each journal that I had filled up and number each page and compile the chapters, put them each into like a Google document and bring together these chapters in a beautiful dance with myself between my masculine and my feminine, my intuitive, like channeling, receiving side, where I would like go to the park and smoke weed and receive these messages and downloads that were like coming through inspired by what I was reading, and then my logical masculine side, which would compile and bring together and organize what I had brought into writing. And after 3 years of writing, bringing together, curating, then compiling quotes from great thinkers, and then creating playlists and visuals, 3 years of creation, it was complete. And then my favorite part of the creation of this book was the final year, which was an entire year of crowdfunding the finished book. And I was able to raise the about $5,000 that I needed to print and ship over this book in a year from people buying the book before it even existed. And that is still one of the most inspiring things that I've ever been able to accomplish. And I feel it was like part me and part the book itself, and prayer and faith. And yeah, just I did a few kind of like gallery showings of the work, live readings to different groups of people, just talking about it on my Instagram, sharing live readings, a few raffles of art compilations of just art that I had made for the book. And eventually I had done it and raised the $5,000, ordered the book, it arrived. I spent a long time, there's an ant on my arm, and that's okay. I spent a long time shipping all the books out that people had placed orders for, and then it was just me and the book, and it led me to many interesting people and places. It's now stocked in a few stores, mainly just in Topanga and Laguna Beach, and I have sold now almost 500 copies of it just on my own, which has been, again, challenging and beautiful, and brought me deeper into my faith and my relationship with creating. Now I'm in a place where I'm almost out of the copies that I had, brought forth into this world, and I'll be left with the book just existing, at least for me, in everyone's hands who has one, and then just on my computer. So I'm thinking what I would like to do is release a second edition that's slightly smaller and with a few edits on the art, because some of it I feel is quite dated for me now. Creating more of like a timeless copy, and hopefully finding a distributor and publisher that can help me, because I wanted to do it on my own, and it was amazing, and I'm ready to not be doing all of that on my own. And I envision to create kind of like an oracle card art deck with the beautiful illustrations that exist from this era of my creation, to just be honored and continue onward. So why I think that it's perfect to be going back to this now, as not just for myself, as a reflection of the ideas that once came through me that I still need a reminder of all the time, but also because I have been becoming more and more conscious, as this podcast alludes to, the spiral and cyclical mapping of our journey through the year, the solar lunar year of our time here on Earth. And I specifically work with a yearly cyclical map, which is anchored by the equinox and solstice points, and currently mapping where the idea is that there's the summer solstice at the top, almost like the north. It can be configured in another way, but this is the way that I look at it. Solstice, summer solstice at the top, winter solstice at the bottom, spring equinox to the right, and fall equinox to the right, and spring equinox to the left. And we go through this cycle, cycling over and over every single year, and it's valuable from a mythological perspective to track the energies that we move through along this heroine's journey through the year. This is something that I was attempting to do on my own, and then my teacher and friend, Genevieve, has helped provide the framework and deeper understanding of tracking these cycles. And so right now we have passed recently, we have passed recently the winter solstice at the very bottom, and this has been like a plunge into, mythologically, a plunge into the depths of our being. In the northern hemisphere, this is the winter, but in the southern hemisphere, this is the summer / along the equator, I guess, it's rainy season. So equator and northern hemisphere, it's very much like cold, wet, like primal cave. Southern hemisphere, it's interesting. The hemispheres are interesting the way they reflect each other. I don't know how I can speak on this much, but Genevieve is in the southern hemisphere, and she says even though it's summer, she still feels that aspect. So we've just been coming out of this winter solstice, depths of the shadows in our primal experience of ourselves and our shadows. And as we emerge towards the spring equinox, which we are in right now, the light trickles in and we get to become deeply aware of where we have just been and what muck is left on us from this journey. And we start tending to it, working with it. And we're here in the spring equinox now, this time of fertility, and the light has come in, the prosperity, the abundance, the creation is here. Along this cycle, we also go through 2 movements through the chakra system. And it's really valuable to see the chakra system and as a cycle rather than a line, which we often see it as, depicted as. So understanding it as a cycle that just feeds back into itself, just like the zodiac. Aries goes to Pisces over and over and over, spiraling onward. And we I'm also tracking where the chakric energies are during this time. And yeah, theoretically, the winter solstice was a crown point. The solstices theoretically are crown points. And if I space things evenly, it ends up a certain way. But I'm feeling into where these energies come in, like when I feel them come in, rather than kind of just looking at even spacing on this map when I draw it. And coming out of the winter solstice was most definitely root chakra time, and it lingered. And I find that it's not even spacing because the chakras are of different densities, which my book is deeply tied to the electromagnetic spectrum and the rainbow. And the chakras come through with that. And the chakras, let me see if I can find, So red, the root chakra is of the lowest density along of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then the crown chakra is of the highest density. So as you go from the lower chakras to the highest, they move through each other faster. So the root chakra was almost all of this winter time. And just before the spring equinox, I felt that shift into the sacral. And so, we're in the sacral time now. And as I wrote this book, I did not set out for it to be this way, but around midway, it became evident that one of the messages of this book was the number 7 and the cycles that we move through, the microcosmic, macrocosmic reflections of these cycles that fractal through each other, and that the chakras are a model or a manifestation, an expression of this cycle, and that I was set to be writing 7 chapters, and that they had been up to that point more or less coinciding with the energies of the chakras. So I was like, wow, okay, everything's always connected and beautiful and revealing itself unconsciously into the consciousness. And here we are. I have 7 chapters coinciding with the chakras, and I didn't even mean to. And so that's why I think it is a perfect time to start with the first and second chapter of my book, just going over them, reading some excerpts and going deeper on some of the concepts. And that is why today I am wearing red and orange, and I have, based on some of the concepts we'll be talking about, this beautiful all-seeing eye, some flowers in gold and orange on my arm, and a shirt with an orange and pink blossoming lotus here in this miniature dome womb space surrounded by orange and red tones as we dive into understanding some of what I wrote when I was 18. So finding my voice to be able to start writing this book took me a second. I knew I had a lot to say, and I realized I didn't know how I was going to say it. That was a big roadblock for a while. And a part of it was realizing that that it was best for me and for this work. I don't know if I would do it for future works, but to be writing in a we format. The first couple chapters still use I and you, which I felt I didn't want to go back and change because it was natural. It was like of the nature of the root and sacral chakra to still be in the I. And then as we moved higher, it became more, stepping more into that collective understanding. And then another part was having to write a few disclaimers. So I'll start with these disclaimers now because I feel like they are still relevant. I thank this book for bringing me along with it. It was some sort of communion where, as I created the pages, they would come into fruition in my life. As I worked on it, I would grow until I was ready to face the next chapter, and then it would present itself to me within my life, giving me the material and insight to work with. It was entirely divinely guided, yet I hesitate to call it a channeled work because I'm not channeling anything. I'm tuning into myself and what is. I'm removing the bullshit layer by layer, allowing the light to come through. I've gone deep into nature, and in the presence of the present, it comes. Second disclaimer. There's so much I could say, and so many ways to go about it. I don't want to tell you what to do, and I don't think I know more than you. Maybe this is enough. Maybe it's perfect. Maybe it's nonsense liberal hippie bullshit. It really depends on you. What you're receptive to. The lens that you see the world through. What are you willing to let go of? Can you stop reading the words? Does that even make sense? Does this challenge your reality or enforce it? Is this new or exactly what you wanted? It's not really up to me, so I'm just going to take a step back and do what I can. It's all been said before. All I can give you is what I've learned in the way I understand it. It's funny because that feels a little bit angsty to me now, but I still just want to honor it and its beauty because it allowed me to create. So maybe as we get into it, maybe you have noticed that since the winter solstice, the depth of winter, until just recently, there's been a deeper focus on finance, on home. Maybe you've moved, familial relationships, your sense of self, our foundation, our root. And now a recent shift has come into this creativity, this very like feminine energy, into fertility, possibility, emotion, a focus on our emotions, increased sexuality or increased themes around sexuality, maybe more socializing as we come into the warmth. And it's all connected. It's not disproved by each other. It's just amplified by each other and reflected in different ways. So this is the energy that we've been moving through. So I'll touch on what came through for the root and sacral chapters in this book. The sacral, the root chapter, this first chapter, the chapters in my book are also denoted like this by, this is chapter 1, because there is a single circle on each page in this red glowing color. And people have said to me that this has been good color therapy for them, which I wasn't aware of, but I think that's really cool. Just meditating and gazing upon it. So this chapter, the root chapter, it addresses our foundational concept of reality. Because the book, That's Just Reality, is kind of questioning and going through, what do we see reality as, and how do we create our own reality, and by understanding its inner workings. So it starts off at our root. What is the ground that we stand upon in terms of reality? What do we think reality even is? It seems that we really think we know what it is, at least now that we've grown up and stopped asking so many questions. When we were little, we were asking so many questions because we knew that we didn't know enough. Everyone told us we didn't know enough. It was enforced. You have to go to school. You have to ask questions. You can't touch that because you don't know anything. And so that was honestly quite a nice place to be because we were aware that we didn't know anything. However, there was this pressure to put the big picture together, get it together so that you can end up like one of these adults that can do things on their own. And so that energy of like, get it together, you got to figure this shit out, really brought us to take in this new information that we were receiving about the world. Or as Plato would say, we don't learn anything, we just remember, because he believed in multiple lives and incarnations. Remember everything so we can get it together, so that we can be independent and stop asking all these questions. And so as we received this information, we would kind of like put a cap on things. And as we conquered confusion, we also, in a way, illusorily conquered curiosity and slowly killed our awe of the world around us for the sake of having this illusion of control. So, yeah, we end up with this tight focus that keeps the unknown out. And it's important to remember the curiosity which comes naturally to us. I'll just read some excerpts from this chapter to go deeper on that exciting journey. To start with a quote from Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception. He says, "It's that archetypal world where men have always found the raw materials of myth and religion." I've always felt that there's something beyond this existence, a memory buried deep in the soul, and sometimes you catch a glimpse in the sky, in a dream, in a kiss, or under a wave. It's why there are religions and the anti-religious too. It's why we ask impossible questions and spend billions in hopes of finding an answer. Young children absorb as much as possible and are left holding on to all that information. It's enforced that you know less, you're naive, and you have much to learn because everyone knows more than you. Every agreement made feels like one step closer to completing that big picture. When I was little, I had many questions and quickly came to those with more complicated answers. I wanted to understand the world, the universe, time and space. What is God? What's after death? What are dreams? Where did I come from? And why are we even here? So far, all my curiosities had been pacified by relatives and teachers, but I could find no direct answer for these. So I thought it must be me. I didn't yet know enough. I must go through many years of school and books and jobs and traveling and people, and then I would know the answers. However, I still don't know. No one does. Behind every theory, hypothesis, religion, philosophy, science, or conversation is the blatant uncertainty of the adults who I thought knew. I now realize the only thing we can ever truly know is that we know nothing at all. In the end, don't we just want to be kids again? Having acquired all these beliefs, opinions, and identifications from our lifelong outward journey, only to realize we have to turn around. In this confusion and disappointment, many lose faith in themselves and are left to gain it externally. But just because that magic wasn't where we sought, doesn't mean it's a hopeless fairy tale. We must begin by pulling back the veil. A man who is in awe and wonders is aware of his ignorance. Aristotle, Metaphysics. That ceaseless lust for knowing is what prevents consciousness of the miracle in every moment. Yet we've grown accustomed to absorb endless information about ourselves and the world we're in because we fear not knowing. Life itself becomes a conquest of the unknown. But once confusion has been overcome, so has fascination. Once we think we know something, we automatically cling to that knowledge. Everything you agree to becomes a part of the lens with which you interpret the world. Though you may forget what it was you agreed to exactly, it remains acting upon you. We structure a reality and box ourselves in with conditions and beliefs and expectations and rules and classifications and on until our true essence is forgotten underneath the mess. Existence itself is overwhelmingly exciting all on its own when you are in awe. We've got to go to the roots of our current perspective. However, to get there, we have to let go of the person we think ourselves to be. The phenomenon of life may be likened unto a dream, a phantasm, a bubble, a shadow, the glistening dew or a lightning flash, and thus they ought to be contemplated. The Buddha. We don't know what is behind the quark. Before the Big Bang, beyond space and time, we don't even know everything humans have known, yet we think we have a grasp on reality. We must be aware of our own ignorance to be receptive of the magnificence filling every moment. I remember learning about space in elementary school was so overwhelming that I would have to go outside to breathe. Some nights I couldn't sleep, completely taken up by the concept of time, space, and mortality. Maybe that sounds dramatic. My classmates didn't seem so affected, which I found was because it's easy to imagine this space we hear so much about as an imaginary story. Like in biology class, when we're so focused on remembering the vocab, we don't realize that all of that is going on inside of us every moment, whether we know the terminology or not. The atoms within you are like stars within the universe. Yet, the atoms make that up too. We are like the web of a spider, the branch of a tree, the swirls on that crazy green cauliflower, you and me. So that's the end of the root chapter. It's meant to open us back up to the curiosity that is natural to us as humans, as children of this world, and to remember that we don't know anything, which I think at this point in my journey sounds very cliche. The only thing we can know is that we know nothing at all, and if you're along the spiritual path, I'm sure you've heard that many times, or come to that conclusion within yourself. And although it may sound cliche, cliches are cliches for a reason, and it's because they're powerful truths. Most of the time, I guess. And for me, this one is something that I have to remind myself of often. And it's not to put this illusory cap on reality, because everything that we experience, everything we witness, everything we see is in relationship with us. Right now I see a spider inside of a paper lantern above my head, and I'm sure that spider would be there if I wasn't looking at it, but this particular perspective of the spider only exists because I'm here to perceive it and to create that perspective for myself and for the universe, really. And everything can be that curious if we only allow it to breathe, to be, instead of this toxic masculine approach which our society is drowning and soaked in, because it is the era that we are just coming out of. We've spent a lot of time in it, and it's almost like a sickness at this point. We've gotten many beautiful tools from the masculine energy that we've been operating in, like written language and agriculture and construction and philosophy, politics, currencies, economics. However, a lot of this also leads to inner dialogues or dialogues with others where we are constantly categorizing everything. Oh, it's kind of cold outside. Not really. I mean, it's like 67 degrees. Yeah, that's kind of cold. I mean, when I was in New York, I had to wear a sweater and I had to wear gloves. And I mean, here I'm kind of sweaty still, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know. I mean, we need to do some yard work. There's some leaves on the ground. I mean, I did it yesterday, but it's already Wednesday. And yeah, no, it looks like I have to do it again. There's leaves everywhere. I need to put it in its place. It's like this, this voice. It comes in subtler forms too, but it gets on my nerves when it takes over my mind or when I find it in conversation. And of course, that's something for me to process on my own, but it's the nature that we've come into in a way where, like I mentioned in this chapter with the seeing what we learn about space or biology or nature as vocab or something we need to remember for a test or an interesting fact, and we forget that it's real. This is really happening, and all we have to say about it, the only things that we know that are written in the books, are really like our perception of it as humans. And then there's the bird's perception of it, and then there's the sky's perception of it, and there's many things undiscovered, and the only way we can discover something that's been undiscovered is to acknowledge that we don't know everything and that we're here to discover something. If we are here to simply classify everything, there's nothing left to learn. And yeah. So that first chapter is really meant to just shake up the Etch-a-Sketch and remind us that we are in a blank canvas and everything we think we have drawn can just be shaken away at any moment and is silly little drawing. Yeah. I end each chapter with some like poetry and journal prompts, which if you don't have a copy, like I mentioned, I only have a few left. So I would love, love, love for you to have one of these copies, as I don't think I'll ever be printing them like this again. Yeah, each chapter ends with a journal prompt. This one is, what was a time when I remember my curiosity being shut down as a child? And with each journal prompt, I just intuitively felt like how many lines were needed. Some have like hella lines, some have just a few lines with like a lot of space for maybe a drawing. And then there's some poetry that I typewritered up. When I was a little girl, I flew through green valleys mounted on cherubims, surrounded by otherworldly kin. I think that someday I will find myself back again. Have you ever really looked while you devour an orange? How can something like that be out there every day? We eat these magical candy bodies of life, perfectly packed snack, and we munch and we are real. Do we see the leaves falling? Why do they fall this way? Swirling, spiraling, gliding. Gravity, air resistance, density of the atmosphere. But why gravity? Why air density? Why all this measure just to watch a leaf dance? Meow, meow, meow. Chapter 2. The sacral orange duality. And as it being the second, I mean the first, the root, let's see, the root is the root chakra. It's red. it is the slowest, deep, like lowest density. Low, not as in bad, low as in slow. So it moves slowly. It has to do with foundations. In the tarot, it's connected to the Fool card. In the zodiac, Aries. All of these things reflect each other. It's this like breath of life. And where are we? Who are we? How are we gonna eat and live? Where do I live? Where am I founded on? Where does my money come from? It's all of these things. And now the sacral, the one splits into two. And the second card on the tarot is the Magician. And also there is the High Priestess. Oh no, the Fool is 0, so the Magician is 1. And then the High Priestess is 2. That's what it is. Anyway, so Fool, Magician. The Magician is the Fool in consciousness, so that both those can go with the root. And then 2, it goes into duality, which is the feminine. There's the High Priestess. The feminine is represented in duality because she is the moon. Root, masculine, sun, red. 2, duality, moon, snake, cycle, death and rebirth, awareness in this dual plane. Sacral, womb, creation, fertility, prosperity, waters, emotions. And so as I was writing this, I still didn't realize I was writing in accordance with the chakras. So this chapter isn't like directly addressing emotions or the feminine. It is more so, now that we've kind of shaken up the ground that we stand upon, it addresses how there's this duality that emerges once we become aware of the unknown. And understanding that this duality of us and the unknown is illusory and something that we created for ourselves to be able to experience this reality, and that we are the unknown. Yet in this manifestation expression of ourselves as human beings, we have a relationship with the unknown. We come face to face with the unknown, and that can only happen within duality. So we learn from that experience, though we never had to create that experience because we are the all being one source reality. It was a self-imposed situation so that we could have the opportunity to experience pain, pleasure, education, experience in self within this world of duality. And this can only happen here. Well, I'll allow the chapter to explain it for itself. I'll start with the quote from Albert Einstein. Once we accept our limits, we go beyond them. Actually, this chapter has a name. It's called Realism. And I'm only reading a few excerpts because I'm not going to read you the entire book. And if you do have a copy, it'd be cute if you followed along, honestly. And I think it would be an addition to this experience. This chapter, I begin it by introducing the fact, the concept, the philosophy, the theory that I find we have 3 main filters on reality with a capital R, reality in itself, that keep us from experiencing reality in itself directly. And the first chapter that reality itself is filtered through to get to us here on Earth in human bodies is space-time. So reality in itself is beyond space and time. Space and time are dimensions that allow for this galaxy, this universe of physical existence and matter to come into being. So yeah, here there are space and time, and the fact that we are within space and time means that there's already a certain limitation on what reality in itself can manifest as or be experienced as here. And the second main limitation or filter is our physical sense receptors. So what do we even have that we are able to receive reality with? How do we even experience reality? We have touch, we have sight, smell, hearing, and that's just the physical. We also have, our emotional bodies, we have our intuition, we have our auric fields, electromagnetic sensitivity to each other's emotions. So all of these ways, it's the second filter, like what ways can we even intake information physically and non-physically? What avenues or channels do we have available? That's the second filter. And then the third is once we have received this data and information through time space and then through our sensory receptors is our language and reason, our rational mind. Language is a matrix. Our reason is the conclusions that we have come to based off of our past experience, and this creates the lens with which we see the world through and leads us to determine what is happening. So with that introduction, I shall begin to read. Physically, we perceive reality via the sense organs that we are equipped with as material beings. Each being is only as capable of receiving from this endless manifestation of reality those which their senses are receptive to. Essentially, physical existence deals with reality dumbed down by the filter of space-time as well as our given sense receptors to form this human experience. Mentally, however, we are not bound by space-time, but by the beliefs and conditions that we attach ourselves to based off of past experiences. For example, the rational mind. Our realities are curated by reason, an archive of knowledge gained from personal experience which forms our perception, our window to reality. This rationale builds upon that part of us born as a tabula rasa, blank slate, and over time situates itself as a person. And so, in the same way reality is filtered through space-time into phenomenon, our true essence is filtered through reason into a character. So, a few things to touch on for me here. One is, like Albert Einstein's quote started us off, once we accept our limits, or at least become aware of our limits, we go beyond them. Which is to say, when we become aware, we're within space-time, we're within our sense receptors, we're within language and reason. There's so much more out there beyond what we are given the capabilities to understand. Then we open ourselves up to the mystical experience, which is the experience that is inexplicable because we experienced something that was not filtered through space-time or our sense receptors or our language and reason and logic. All of a sudden, this information or this data comes in from an inexplicable source, and we are left absolutely blasted open and shocked, or inspired or bewildered. Also, it's good to acknowledge space-time and our given sense receptors on a physical gross plane level is not something that we can work with. It's not something we can work on. We can't change the fact that we are within space-time as a human being, and we can't change the fact that we only have so many sense receptors, and maybe even are born without some of the typical ones. But what we can work with much more readily is our relationship to language, culture, our rational mind, the way we reason the information that comes in. So that's why one of the key principles of the spiritual journey is know thyself. Because when we get to know who it is that is reacting to the world and why we react that way, that is the part that we can most readily work with and alter. Because, you know, we see these filters and we're like, I want to get to reality in itself. What can I do? How can I break free? And that's the first thing, I think, is becoming aware of ourselves and becoming aware of the way that we move with our data and information that comes in. And this can be understood through our zodiac. This can be understood through our gene keys, our human design, meditation, simple and pure meditation, bringing awareness and consciousness into our everyday life, and like becoming aware of the ways we react, you know, just the practice of the witness is really powerful. However, once we get deeper into that practice, of maybe learning more languages, becoming aware of the way that language dictates our experience of reality, knowing ourselves and the way we react to the world, all of this brings us into a place where we realize that we actually do have ways of moving past, beyond our sense receptors and time and space. We gain deeper access to the part of ourselves which is beyond this physical body, and thus beyond those limitations. Also, I wanted to just mention, because I've become slightly more critical. When I say this rationale builds upon that part of us born as a tabula rasa and over time situates itself as a person. Philosophically, the idea of tabula rasa, which is Latin for like blank slate, is kind of like nature versus nurture in a way, where it's like debating, like, do we come in as a blank slate, or do we come in with preconceived understandings and beliefs and experience and personality because we've had experience beyond this life. And because I mention tabula rasa, I don't want anyone to think that that's what I believe, that we come in as a blank slate. That's why I say it is that part of us born as a tabula rasa, and over time situates itself as a person. So what I believe is that there are aspects of us which are born into this world ready to be shaped and formed by the experiences that we will have. And even those same aspects may already be influenced by, and others are influenced by that which comes in this world with us, our soul that is beyond this incarnation, before and after, above and below. And yeah, just wanted to say that. Okay, let's see, where did I want to go next? In this ceaseless search for reality, we inevitably come to the unknowable, because reality can't be minimized to our level. As long as we search within space and time, we won't go past these limitations of physical perception. Reality can't be measured, graphed, or calculated, because these numbers themselves are just a manifestation of it, a product of the synchronicity. It's like trying to know a person from one cell without even knowing what a human is. There would be genome, cell structure, and you could study it all. But how could you even fathom organs, skin color, or the body? What about the mental realm of opinions, beliefs, dreams, speech, and emotions? There would be truths, but humanity cannot be minimized to the observation of the cell. But if you be the cell, then you suddenly are the body, existing for and by it. You are of it, and it is of you. Process flows through you and because of you. It made you, yet you make it. It can't be explained, calculated, or identified, yet you're constantly it, aware or not. So this is, the coming face to face with the unknown, the reality in itself, and this like typical approach that we're used to of conquering, or of duality, where it's like we come face to face with it and it's like there's me and there's the unknown, and how can I ever come to know it? And then there is the moving beyond duality and just accepting, acknowledging, realizing that you are it, even just a little part. You are all of it, and also just a little fragment of it. Rumi says, you are not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a drop. And yeah, that's what this is reminding of us here, is like we can access the way that we can access the universe through a grain of sand is in the surrender to the fact that it is a part of it, pulsating in the network of it. And when you just allow yourself to be limitless, the ways and the points in which our being connect to every other part reveal themselves and become more visceral, and it's no longer about mapping it out or figuring out how it all connects, because that's an impossible task. It's just in experiencing it, and that's why the experience is so important, because we are the center of our own universe, and I'm the center of my own world, and there is no other perspective or point of view for me than this one right here. And from this place in surrender, I have bright orange toenails. In surrender, it's the difference between like trying to figure it all out and then just being. And in that being, so much more information comes through, because you're not limiting yourself by trying to figure out what it all means or mapping out exactly what that information is, though that is an honorable task and a beautiful practice. Trusting our intuitive sense of experiential reality to just be enough, and that surrender allows so much more to come in. It's hard to talk about, it seems. Experience can only occur in ignorance to that all-being unity. If we were fully aware of what Buddha calls nirvana, what Aldous Huxley calls mind at large, what Aristotle calls the principal cause, or what Plato calls the good, we would be at one with what is egoless and lose the incentive to survive as an individual. The ignorance that we run from is necessary for the enlightenment we seek. Like the wind under a bird's wing, the bird gets tired of flapping against the air and wishes it gone, but flight could not be without that resistance. Duality, the necessity of one for the other to exist, forms the constituents of physical existence itself, like the positive and the negative of an image. If you remove one, the other would cease to exist, and there would be no image to observe. It would all just be one. We are reality experiencing itself in ignorance, which it itself applied. Vibrations within vibrations, observing ourselves from the perception of individual. Ignorance of that unlimited and boundless unity brings us to feel pain, pleasure, emotion, thought, which make up the human experience. A quote from Swami Prabhupada. The illusory energy is manifested in the duality of desire and hate. Those who are deluded by duality and nescience think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is created by material energies. Such deluded persons symptomatically dwell in dualities of dishonor and honor, misery and happiness, woman and man, good and bad, pleasure and pain. A little poem. You don't notice sleep. You don't feel pins and needles as your foot falls asleep. You feel them when you try to wake it back up. Can you recall the point at which you fell asleep? The transition. I know when I'm awake. I remember waking up. It happens, yet you don't notice sleep until you wake up. And it stings, and it's shocking. And the closing question for this chapter: who is someone who is triggering negative reactions within me? Can I identify a similar behavior within myself? Reflecting into the duality and how it is all one. So many little ants. Well, that leaves us at the third chapter, which is the solar plexus, and I will tune into that one, share it with you when I feel we have entered into the solar plexus time, which in my original drawing of the graph was supposed to be landing around the spring equinox, but I feel like it'll probably be happening in a few weeks, like once we're deeper in spring. Thank you so much for listening. Let's see. Just about an hour. Great. So, wow, this has been a lovely experience for me. I feel like I'm coming deeper into my eloquence, and it's definitely helpful to be talking about something that I've written myself and I'm already quite familiar with. And it's a reminder to just do what is easy and keep it easy. I don't have to struggle to create an episode, because then I end up taking a million years and not actually completing what I wanted to do. And this is something that is easy for me, and I think lovely for you to experience. So thank you so much for listening. I also got, tragically, yet of course divinely, locked out of the Spiral Revival YouTube account, which is not that big of a deal because I really didn't have that many subscribers, but I was starting to have viewers that were finding me only through YouTube, which I just found quite fascinating. That people would find a video of me talking with hardly any views, and then watch an hour-long video of me talk about something and leave comments, and they were getting quite a few views. Some of them were getting 400 views in a day, just from people finding it on YouTube, which was really cool. And I feel sad to just leave that account alone and empty, but I can just make a new one, and I trust that that will continue happening in that new one as well. So yeah, this video will be the first video in this new channel, and I think that that's makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, the energy today feels fiery and watery, invigorating, curious, inspiring, action taking. Yeah. Blessings unto you. Farewell.